So as you've talked about...
What's your name, sir?
Robert. My name is Robert Thomas. I'm actually an alumni.
Awesome.
At College Charleston.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. So one of the things that I think has made you attractive across the political spectrum to different parts of both the right and the left is, as you've talked about, your foreign policy ideas of avoiding regime change wars and interventionism overseas and things like that. But one of the things that I can remember, of course, from Trump's campaign is that when Trump came in, he had a lot of the same rhetoric. And just to use an example of something that's been in the news recently, Saudi Arabia, if you go back to his debates with Hillary Clinton, he was actually very anti-Saudi. Like, he compared the Saudis essentially almost to ISIS, that they were chopping off heads, that they were raping women, and things like this. But then when he got into power, there was sort of a 180 change, and now he's actually been his administration has been one of the most pro-Saudi administrations probably in recent memory. And so there's been a substantial change in rhetoric, and there's reasons for that. Like, one of it is just Trump's sort of a Machiavellian kind of guy, and he just does one thing one day. He's gonna do what he's gonna do. But the other part of it is I do feel he does genuinely have some non-interventionist tendencies. But
I agree with you.
Yeah. But when he has tried to do those things, like reaching out to Putin or mulling, pulling out of Syria or pulling out of Afghanistan, there's been this substantial pushback from sort of this foreign policy establishment, whether or not it's foreign policy elites or it's, the defense contractor establishment. This whole establishment pushes back on him, and, his ideas then are essentially thwarted, and he can't implement those policies. And so my question is, how would your administration handle that differently, or how would you actually succeed? Because when they start coming after you and they start labeling you...
They're already coming after me.
So they start labeling you an Assad apologist or a Russian puppet or whatever other terminology they're going to use, and they start threatening you with investigations and impeachment to try to prevent you from carrying out your foreign policy. How are you going to handle it differently and actually be able to implement your policies and not fall into the same trap a lot of other administrations have fallen into?
Thank you. Thank you. This is such an important question, and just the last thing you said there I think is important, that yes, I agree with much of what you said about Trump, but this is also something that has happened to previous administrations as well. And so your question is a fair one. What makes me different from other presidents who have made these promises going into office and then have completely flipped the switch and done exactly the opposite of what they promised that they would do? Here's the difference, is I'm coming from a place of very personal experience about what the cost and consequences of these decisions made by the President, Commander-in-Chief, and Congress are. This is about my family. This is about my fellow veterans. This is about every single one of our service members and their families, who are the ones who pay the price for these decisions. So I take that responsibility very, very seriously. I am well aware, both through that experience as a soldier, as well as my time serving in Congress for almost 7 years, focused on national security issues through the armed services, foreign affairs, homeland security committees, and I've had front row seats to the foreign policy establishment and the military-industrial complex and the influence that they have across both political parties in Washington. And as I mentioned, they're already trying very, very hard to undermine my campaign and trying to lob all these different names. You mentioned some of them. There are others that are worse at me, trying to smear my character, trying to make it look as though I have other allegiances other than to the country that I am willing to put my life down for. And all of this is happening because they refuse to debate me on the substance of the issues that I'm raising and the policy changes that I am seeking to bring about. This is coming from the media, this is coming from a lot of folks in Washington, it's coming from a lot of different directions, but if you look at it and you watch it, it is so superficial that they are playing off of what they hope will be to foment fear and suspicion in people. It's because they cannot debate on the policy. They refuse to, because if they do, they would be forced to be confronted with the truth and the facts of the consequences of our failed foreign policy, of being the world's police, of where we sit now with this policy of confrontation and escalating tensions with nuclear-armed countries. So how will I have the courage to withstand those attacks? I am showing that I have the courage today.